Hello, everyone. It's April 9th. Welcome to another discussion of the National Candidate Slate. I'm joined here by Diane Sare in the studio and also Mr. Lyndon LaRouche. And over Skype video, we have Keisha, Diane, Keisha, Rachel, Bill, and Dave. So welcome all of you, and I'll let Lynn begin the conversation.
Well, as you notice, we did something this past Wednesday in another channel. And we're going to be doing more in that direction this week, this Wednesday, as well, which means we're changing the perspective of life and everything else. And as this, the function of this includes the development of our understanding of how the universe works, and with a specific emphasis on what our program is for our national program, a national economic program. We'll be going into, in the coming weeks, we're upgrading this picture we did last Wednesday. We'll be doing more of the same thing. The idea is to get a top-down view of the overall situation and to integrate the actors, the players, essentially into a single framework, so that we can overcome the sense of smallness. That is, that if you have 4 candidates or 5 candidates running, then you have smallness in the sense of 5 smallnesses. If you have 5 people running with a national program, as a national policy, a national plan, a national mission, then you no longer are small. You're no longer small people. You are actually an expression of a national policy, a national movement. And you know what that is now. We're going with we have the 3 elements here and that we've already defined, and we're going to go with it. And I suggest let's go with it and see how it plays. And if we have to make some corrections in the process, that will probably be useful too.
Right.
Good. Well, there's a lot happening, I think. Bill has some really interesting things to report on his meetings with the NWAPA report. I can just say that what's very clear from the campaigning we've done recently over the weekend, I had about 22 volunteers out, and we visited over 700 households in my district. And what's striking is how much people hate Obama. This is Bergen County. It's a Democratic area. And the supporters who had gone door to door said, well, you get about 1 a day. One Obama supporter. Huh. They were very struck. And the other thing was we had on the back of the leaflets a map of just the outline of NWAPA, which we were discussing people on the campaign, and it really had a transformative effect on the population. People were intrigued. They want to come. We're having a conference at the end of the month. It definitely it changes the whole dynamic of what you're discussing with them.
This is what we want, exactly what we want. We want the sense of participation in forming a movement. And people are not just individuals or local cases, but they're thinking of the nation as a whole, that they're participating in shaping the policy of the nation. They are implicitly reaching out to other parts of the nation, the population. They are feeling themselves an integrated national force. Exactly what we want, which is what our policy essentially is.
Right. Well, this is important. Diane and I did some calls this morning. We've been finding different candidates around the country who are registered federal candidates, but are running, as of now, just their own campaigns in the western states, in upstate New York, in Michigan, in other places. And they have a legitimate feeling of smallness when they think that they're only a local candidate. But when we've contacted them and said, look, this is our program, and this is a national program, and we have this national slate, it addresses this pessimism directly, and it has created a sudden and very substantial change in their thinking.
Yes, and so the key of emphasizing the 3 points we've emphasized is what's the key to that. That's how you can unite the whole population around one single concept. Huh?
Right.
And that's what we have to do.
Right.
And I think the nation obviously needs a national mission. I don't know if there's echoes on your end, but the nation needs a national mission at this point. And I think if you look at already the kind of work that we've been doing around Nawapa, the work that we've done, where it situates it that, one, we're going to need the whole nation involved. It's just such a vast amount of work to be done. But immediately in the outreach, you find, say for some of the unions, you already have crossing state boundaries just within one union, and what we've begun to initiate through this kind of outreach is already where you get many states now communicating around what this project would mean in terms of the what it would take to rally the forces to make it happen. And I think then putting it under the umbrella that it should be seen under, which is under the credit system, that what this really represents, in which the national mission represents, is an orientation that we are preparing the groundwork for the future. And that's what we need to bring to these people, is a sense of mission and restoring morality with this kind of looking to the future.
Yeah, I'll add something to that, because I think part of what we're doing with this outreach to other candidates in these areas is that we are setting the standard for what it means to be a candidate, which is not that you're going out and you are making a bunch of promises for what you're going to do for your little area. But rather, as Kennedy took the approach, you're not saying, okay, here's the things I'm going to do for you, but you're saying, here are now the challenges which I'm prepared to put forth for the nation. And these are the challenges that people have to take up. And so we're essentially recruiting candidates from what they see as small, maybe somewhat important local candidacies, where maybe they can get in or get some votes because the incumbents are so hated. And now we're bringing them into a unified campaign where the clear thing is that now it is the fight for the defense of the Constitution, and that they can act as a candidate. Their role is to challenge the American population to fight for what the Constitution is, and this concept of national banking, which is the framework within which we have the solution to people's problems.
The key difficulty is going to be to make sure we get that point across, and get it across as a united movement, which is not broken down into discussion of local issues as such. The key thing, of course, is the Glass-Steagall. That's easy to explain. And you've got always that thing that has to be covered, which is, well, we're going to bankrupt and close down a lot of banks, which are not the suitable kind of banks to have. And people are going to say, well, you're going to bankrupt people. People are going to starve. They're going to go without money, without their bank. And this thing has to be very clearly laid out and explained so people have no doubts what this is about. That we're going to have the Glass-Steagall will give us a commercial banking system back again. And that you will have a good bank, and the banks that we're going to close down are the banks that are no good anyway. They don't have any value in them in the first place. They're simply stealing from the population. Then you get to this business of the idea of the national credit, and that's a difficult one for them because they're not used to that. They're used to thinking that money contains value, where actually, in point of fact, money does not contain value. It's the rules of the game in terms of the system which define the location of value. And so that kind of thing. And so but then the Nawapa comes in, and the detailing of Nawapa, now we have the program laid out. And Nawapa defines a massive investment program with an estimated 30-year span of realization. So they said that's the main thing we're going to be doing, but we're also going to do other things in addition to Nawapa, but they're going to be the same approach in principle. We're going to expand beyond Nawapa because we're going into other projects beyond the Nawapa thing, and extensions of Nawapa, which are not now included in Nawapa. So we have a growth in terms of productivity, quality of productivity, and the levels of physical income. The idea of the increase of the physical income in net effect in the population is the idea. And so that if we make these ideas clear and show the public that these conceptions unite the nation in everything that is essential to rebuild this nation. Then they can think about that as a single idea. When you get it down to, you can think about the whole program as a single idea, you now have a way to mobilize the population to take over its own country. As long as you divide it into this issue plus this issue plus this issue, that part plus that part, you can never get unity. Because the voter will always go back then, in that case, will go back and say, well, I give 1 vote for this, 2 votes for that, 3 votes for that sort of thing, kind of thing. And that's what we have to avoid. So the actual achieving the clarity of a unified conception of the entire policy of the nation built around these concepts, the 2 concepts which are the concept dealing with the question of money, but dealing as credit. Glass-Steagall and the reserve system, essentially the reserve system is what we call it. And then we have the other elements which are essential, which is the unity of the population around specific objectives. So you want the citizen to think in those terms, think that there's one policy for this nation. It's not a fragmentation of a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And that's where we have the challenge, the real challenge. To get people who've been thinking about choices, like market choices. Shall I spend money on this or shall I spend money on this? Shall I do this or shall I do that? See, there's only one thing you have to do. You have to run the economy as a unified force. And that's going to be the great challenge on which success depends.
Well, I was just going to say that people should also know that our team here has put out a statement, a call to action for all of the federal candidates and scientists and engineers on this very principle that as we unify the nation around the NWAPA 21, the key thing, the principle behind it is that we are out to break and destroy the axioms that have crippled the thinking of the population, that has taken us away from the drive toward productivity, technological and scientific development that our nation should have been participating in for the last 40 plus years. Now, this axiom that people have adopted has been something we've been hitting at for quite some time. It is the belief in a monetary system, belief in money. And I think that the most important thing that people can do as they're looking at and going through the development of the NWAPA 21 is the importance of the credit system, the importance of the fact that none of this is going to happen without the return to Glass-Steagall banking reorganization. And the credit system can be immediately implemented, first and foremost, through the investment into the NWAPA program. And I think what Michael and others have done in the development of the 3rd section of this report, people can't skip over. It is very critical to understand and to work through. We have to work through this with engineering departments. We should work through this with the engineering schools. We should work through this with political circles. And people have to get an understanding of how important it is to understand how the framers of our Constitution, people such as in the founding of the National Bank, Alexander Hamilton, put forth the policy of the credit system into practical implication, which would mean putting this type of credit system very immediately into the production of the North American water and power lines. So that's one of the things that's issued in our call to action, because as we look at what the nation is facing, the continued collapse of the global monetary system, the fact that you have no real policy being discussed amongst the circus show of clowns with Obama and the Republican slate of candidates for president, that this policy is the direction toward implementing what a real presidency should be, as we've been discussing throughout these talks here. So I think people should immediately join with us on this call, and this is what we're talking about here today.
Well, I also want you add something else to what I said before. The concept of energy flux density, the way in which to make this whole package comprehensible for people, is to weave in an understanding of energy flux density. What you're doing then, you're also directly attacking on the Greenie movement. because the greening movement says less energy flux density, and that means death of the population. So you get that kind of counter to shock people who are green. Say, well, if you are sticking to green policies, you're going to die. This nation is going to die, and you're going to die. Mm-hmm. Give up that nonsense. Come with us. Progress is what is needed. You need energy flux density increases. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. Otherwise, you're going to die. And this is the way you can actually live, is by increasing the energy flux density, your diversity in terms of production, the idea of the increment of the energy flux density expressed in many terms. The idea of unifying the whole conception of what a nation must be.
Well, I think that's directly what a real credit system is dealing with, is those being the increments of increase, of increasing the energy flux density of the system as a whole, is how you want to think about your investment cycles and so on. But I was just thinking of this because Ben Franklin has a nice little commentary on paper currency. And at a certain point, he asks, well, what gives credit to paper currency? And he says, some will say gold and silver. And he says, well, I want to choose a different value of a different value. And he says, and I choose labor. And then he takes an example where he says, one man toiling in a field for a year versus another man toiling for a year mining silver. Right, and if at the end the man mining silver has 20 ounces of silver, and the man planting corn has 20 bushels of corn, then the work or is 1 ounce of silver for 1 bushel of corn. And then he poses the paradox. He says, well, what if the next year there's a mine that's closer or a richer mine, and that now man gets 40 ounces of silver for the same 20 bushels of corn, and he throws that out, that now either it's half as expensive or double price. But the point is on that is there's never this 1-to-1 ratio, because what you're actually looking for is the credit that you're making available has to be going into the kinds of projects or technological innovation that gives you the increase of faster rates of transportation, better energy production per unit of mass. So these kind of, but it all comes back to that. What you have to be thinking about is making those kinds of investments into the future.
I mean, one thing in light of what you were saying about the environmentalists is this absolutely outrageous national intelligence estimate report that says we should not expect anything to change in terms of water supply for the next 30 years. And is this for humans or is this for baboons? I mean, it really is, it's a criminal outlook, and the idea that anyone can produce such a thing and behave as if that's a normal standard of behavior. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Well, just think one other thing. What is the state of mind of the person who doesn't make that distinction? They are not really human in their thinking. Because the idea of progress, of man's progress, which is what man is, without this sense of progress, man is nothing. He's just another beast. What happened to the man who thinks that? The man is a slave, and he will be destroyed when he's considered to be surplus. Mm-hmm. No, why is this? This is the whole oligarchical principle. And if you go through the history of mankind in terms of the oligarchical principle, and you look at what the conditions of society were with the various empires, like the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Venetian system, and so forth, and the British Empire, all of these things are things which were on different levels of productivity, but they all were mass killers of humanity. And therefore, that's what has to be said. Well, you must be stupid to believe in this stuff. It's the only way you can deal with it.
And our Constitution is actually derived from that. It's not just a simple body of rules or something, but our Constitution, including the credit system, is founded on the idea of human creativity as unique in the universe. I mean, that is what the idea of the self-evident truths of what mankind are. That's what it's referring to, is a question of creativity in the universe. And so, yeah, when all these greenies, say things like they worry about the environment, what they're not discussing is the relationship of man to the biosphere, and the fact that the entire universe is developing, and it is the conscious action of mankind of that process, which has to be discussed in economy.
Yeah, well, what that means is you're talking about a person who believes that human life, should be subhuman, that there should be no difference between mankind and some kind of beast, that you should have a fixed capability, like a fixed productivity, a fixed power of production, and you should never go above that level of productivity. And if things become worse because you get depleted, then you should go down and accept a lower condition of life. And what this means, we're now today, with the development of the solar system and the galaxy, a part of it, that kind of policy would mean the extinction of the human species. A person who says they're a greenie is, when did you plan to have your extinction party? Is what it amounts to. And this has to be ridiculed, it has to be attacked, it has to be constant, because if people believe in it, they're insane. Their behavior will be insane. And then this is conceding to this stuff, which is the corruption. It always has been. The Roman Empire is a good example of exactly how that worked. And it's always the mind of the slave. Only
that's the basis of the feudal system, what they tried to set up with like the guild system, where you don't have any kind of technological advancement and you actually fight against it. But you just keep it where there's some ratio between how much land you have available, how much farming and construction and so on can go on. That's all within the confines of these fixed limits. That's the basis of the feudal structure.
And the other aspect is the increase in energy flux density. The primary driver in terms of technology as such, of all improvements and maintenance of human society, is the increase in energy flux density, the application of energy flux density. And that's it. If you don't do that, you're going to die. The species is going to die.
Right, and that requires that the population, the human population, decides that they are no longer going to be slaves to the system of, genocide and environmentalism that the empire is pushing. And you look at what's going on now, where the president Obama has just called for Iran to shut down its nuclear facilities. And obviously this has been, what this amounts to is exactly as we've been saying, that Obama is pushing a policy on behalf of the empire, not just for driving thermonuclear war, because obviously World War III, as we've been saying, we know that this is what it's going to lead to as we continue to go into these nations. But the key thing that we're discussing here is that the drive toward destroying the increase for energy flux density, the drive to keep human beings as herded cattle and to eliminate billions of people from the population, it couldn't be more evident now than ever as we are continuing to see the crisis become more and more dire and devastating for mankind. So I think that, it's very clear as to what we've been saying. When you have a president who has total disregard for the powers of our Constitution and our republic, as Rachel just said, and is adamant to push this policy of of a policy of the green environmentalism, but more so policy that's going to destroy and kill millions of people if it's not stopped. That's what we're discussing.
You know, a situation in Iran where they're going after these scientists. Now, I've heard Seymour Hersh has this article where he discusses that some of the MEK terrorists were literally trained on U.S. soil, and then this is some of the same network that we see assassinating the Iranian scientists, the nuclear scientists. But it's really this mentality that, it's almost like Pol Pot or something, you know, killing everybody with glasses in Cambodia or something. But that mentality. But I think coming back to it, any form of Republican statecraft. You go back to what Da Vinci was doing with looking at technology, the capabilities he developed around machine tools, and you always see the relationship between the kind of scientific and, well, in this case, the artistic expression as well, being intricately tied with the development of Republican statecraft. I'm sure the question of Machiavelli's relationship to Da Vinci, but that's always what Republican form of statecraft has been, is pushing technology, pushing creativity per se in your society. And this oligarchical principle, we see it where it's not only that they're against even just the technology, but they're killing the very people that can create the technology.
Yep.
Well, we really are at the point. I mean, we've got the intersection between, as Keisha brought up, a escalation towards impeachment because of Obama's explicit attack on the judiciary branch of the United States government. Also, what you've warned about, that with Obama's position being challenged and under the influence of the British Empire, he will push towards launching war, whether it be Iran or Syria or North Korea, and at the same time, the hyperinflation of the transatlantic system.
To make it explicit, take the concrete situation. We now have a situation between the judiciary and Obama.
Right.
Obama is trying to defy the judiciary and saying the judiciary has no authority against elected people.
Right.
Now, this is not going to work. What the consequence then is, what is Obama going to do? Now, this becomes the question of what's Obama's personality.
Yeah.
Because he's going to react according to what his personality is. Now, if he is being defied at this point on this issue, what's his obvious trick? Go immediately to new war, to avoid and postpone any question of the question of judiciary.
Right.
So that's what we're facing. Now, that means what? It means a general extinction of the human population, including that of the United States. Mm-hmm. So anybody who tries to defend Obama on this issue is in very deep trouble, one way or the other. And this is one thing which, it's not just the pride of the judiciary, it's everything in the Constitution.
Yeah.
And if you accept this Obama's rule on this question, you're accepting a Hitler-like dictatorship, or worse. And that's come to the crucial point now, where the conflict between the judiciary and Obama is now of that nature. And it's not just a technical thing about jealousy, about authorities and so forth. This goes much deeper. Now, unless Obama goes down, or he just plain accepts defeat as the alternative, which he's not likely to do, particularly with the British behind him,
right,
then we're headed for an immediate crisis, and he's going to try to go for thermonuclear war. Now, can he be controlled? Or do the Americans have the guts to control him? That's the question. Because we're coming up to thermonuclear war in many ways. We're up to the edge of it on many conditions.
Yeah.
Now, this is the one where Obama is challenged unnecessarily, on this case by the judiciary, because we lose any constitutionality whatsoever. At the same time, we have a situation in Europe where Jacques Cheminade, his effect on his campaign is is actually moving up, because the failure of most of the other parties wearing down, and he's moving up. How far that goes, we don't know, but there is a change in that direction. So we're in a world situation where these kinds of factors are actually influencing the environment in which we're operating. Yes. And therefore we have to think in these terms. Also the ability of the British to maintain this program of genocide, etc., that is weakening. Again, the effect is twofold. One, this trend is a threat to the Obama administration, to the dictatorship. At the same time, reciprocally, it means Obama is going to become more and more ferocious and more the Hitler he is. So therefore, that's going to be the situation. And that is what the citizen has to see. And once the citizen sees this, and this emphasis on the question of the authority of the judiciary branch of government, that poses it, not because judges are greedy or something like that. It poses it because instinctively, any of them know what this means. It means a complete disintegration of law. So to the extent a lawyer or judge has any sense of law, this issue actually goes to the core of the matter.
And it comes on the heels of his disregard of the legislative branch with the Libya War Powers case.
It also goes, what we dealt with in our briefing releases on the question
mysterious deaths.
Mysterious deaths. And it's obvious that there were mysterious deaths. And they were done in the way which affects Obama's position.
Right.
Why not? That's his mentality. Why shouldn't he think like that? That's what his mind is like. Right. As I said in 2009, it's exactly what his mind is like. So we're now at a very interesting point of crisis in this whole process. First of all, without the judiciary factor being accepted as authority, as it is, as bad as it might be, that represents some semblance of rational authority. And therefore that has to be defended. And that brings us to a conflict between Obama and the population. It unsettles what they would like to pretend is settled. They want the inertia of their authority to roll on and roll on and roll on and roll off and past every obstacle to his willpower. But now the situation is such that the nation cannot function. If you were to attack the judiciary, you could not maintain the nation as an organized force. It would be the disintegration of the United States, the disintegration of Europe. Yeah. So now this is the issue. Is civilization or Obama? And so it's no longer the same. Now what that means, you cannot make firm decisions as to what that is going to mean. But you have a firm decision to be made. And soon you cannot postpone that decision. And if you do it sanely, insist on it sanely, you're going to crush this Obama phenomenon. If you give in, that's the end of civilization.
Well, that's part of this actually problem with the population, because they tend to have a view that things are just gradually getting worse, or that it's a cycle. It's bad now. That, in other words, to have a president now who is a carbon copy of Nero, as the financial system is blowing out, and we're facing food shortages in the United States and asteroids hitting the planet, to have this now is not a situation we're going to live through.
It was that people will try to say, okay, Mother, let's go to bed.
Right.
Let's just forget about it, and we'll see how it looks in the morning. Right? And the citizen tends to do that. Either they kill one another in order to cease the argument or something, or they just simply say, let's postpone it. Yeah. Maybe it'll be better in the morning. Maybe it will be better next week. I heard that the jobs are opening up someplace. Right. Things like that, as they did before. But this is coming to the point where that is no longer possible. And that's what we've got to understand. There are no absolute predictions, contrary to what people think. There are policy matters which will shape the way mankind reacts. And now we've come to the point where nothing that's being pushed can be accepted. It's either extinction or crush this.
Right.
And very few people have the guts, the integrity, to really look at this issue and say, we got to make that decision.
And that's why the state of mind of the president is one of the most important things to be discussed. Because besides the crimes that have been committed, people can discuss that all they want. But unless they actually discuss the fact that this guy is a ticking time bomb, they're not really addressing what can happen at any moment, which really is evidenced by these 4 murders. This guy was put in office by a bloody path. Just recently, I was at an event in Harvard where David Miliband was speaking, and he said that we needed to change our Constitution in order to give the executive more power to make budget cuts, to cut Social Security and whatnot in our economy. So there is a direct call by the British to overthrow the U.S. Constitution, and that is what Obama is there to do. And they're sort of making a laughingstock of Americans right now by putting all this stuff on the table and seeing whether or not we're going to throw this guy out.
You know my decision. That's what has to be done. If the guy is destroying our nation, destroying our law, destroying the rights of humanity, does nothing right, is cruel and vicious in every respect, has become more and more so ever since he became president, was like that beforehand, this man must be removed from office. And we have all the constitutional guides, and they're not merely tricks and authorities. They are authorities which are inherent in our society. If we're going to have the kind of society that we're worked to get, when something like this happens, we have to remove it. We cannot, it's just like we cannot allow the dangerous diseases to be spread. When a disease erupts, which is a threat to humanity, you must remove that disease, because our protection of the people as civilization is essential. This president is a disease, a fatal disease, and he must be removed from office in order that peaceful government may proceed. And it's going to take people with the guts to see that and act on it. And that's what we have to be, the sparks that get people to see things that have to be done and to do them.
Mm-hmm. No, and your wife, Helga, made a statement, an address to the American people, which is going to be on our site today, which she ends by saying, the weight of the world is on your shoulders and the eyes of the world are upon you. So Americans, please, please act.
That's necessary, isn't it?
Yes.
We are responsible not for making compromises, but for doing what's necessary. We're responsible for humanity. We're responsible to protect humanity, to provide the conditions which humanity requires for its development, its realization. Mm-hmm. And that's our responsibility. And it's also our responsibility to think clearly so that those decisions that we might make are valid. Mm-hmm. But we don't have a society which has been functioning that way for a long time. Since Kennedy was assassinated, we've never had that kind of society in the United States. We've had people who desire it, but never the enforcement of that kind of conception of society. No enforcement of what the meaning of a constitution is.
That's why we're calling on an army of patriots to join with us to restore that great common mission that, our nation was founded on.
Yep, precisely.
Best thing you can do.
Best thing we can do. It's the only thing we can do. Everything else will fail.
Yeah.
And we have to protect the little dogs as well as the people. It's true, loving little dogs, They're maybe only dogs, but they're lovable. We want them around.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for watching, and be sure to join us again next week.
Thank you.
Think good thoughts.